Welcome to Magic Club. I'm Andrew Main, joined by
Jordan Gold. That's me. Sorry.
You just jumped right in there with your own name.
Cut it on.
Is that what you do? Do you just call the the host off the stage, the MC, like, I got it. So you and I have had a very hectic couple of weeks here, and some interesting stuff, and I'm going to dive right into some news, Jordan. First up, you're just telling me that Phoenix Playing Cards, the company that produces the cards, they had a fire in Germany. What was going on?
Yeah, I logged into Facebook, I don't know, a week ago, and I actually saw it on Tom Stone's page first, that all of his stock of his new Trick Factory blanks went up in a blaze of glory, or not so much glory, just tragedy, in this warehouse fire from Card Shark, who produces like all of the sort of cutting edge of trick decks right now, or trick deck technology. Their decks are just insane, as far as what they're able to produce, like super thin cards, like double flat, like flappy crazy cards. Like you kind of have to just see what they have going on. But apparently, I don't know if it was their only warehouse or one of their warehouses, but went up. There's a Genie article about it, and it's not great.
Yeah, but they could still, the cards will still be in production, all that. It's a setback, but you can help them out if you want. So, and support the cards if you like the cards. So, thankfully, nobody was hurt. That's sort of the bottom line on that. But that's frustrating. In Magic, we're dependent upon such small inventories of things, and one thing gets wiped out, and that can have an effect. So, hopefully, they'll be able to recuperate from that. Nice little write-up is in the Scranton, PA, and the Star Tribune about Dorothy Dietrich, First Lady of Magic. I've worked with Dorothy before. She's wonderful. She's part of the whole Houdini Museum in Scranton, PA, and it's with Dick Brooks. It's a very neat museum. They feature a lot of different exhibits and stuff. Also, there's the Perform, and it's a nice write-up about the Houdini Museum, about Dorothy's performing, and just sort of over kind of like a little bit of the history there and what they have there. I think it's a nice write-up. It's neat to see this bit of history get some attention there. So it's in Scranton, PA, a museum to magician Houdini. The collection includes the famous magician's props and other strange magic by George Gonzalez. It's actually the Washington Post where this appeared in. So worth looking up and checking that out.
It's a lot of magic that's just sort of sprinkled all over kind of random spots. You've got the also Colon, Michigan, right? Mm-hmm. The magic capital of the world, and like it's sort of funny where these things pop up. There's also in the New Jersey Six Flags, they have a Houdini ride that's super amazing.
Oh wow!
That almost nobody knows about. That every magician should go check it out because it's actually like one of my favorite rides of all time.
Well, let's have to pay homage. We should do a podcast from there. What I love is to see when somebody's figured out kind of a really cool kind of venue or an environment in which to perform, because often as magicians, we sort of get locked into trying to figure out like, oh, where's my stage? Where am I going to do this? Whatnot. The San Antonio Current has a great article about magician Scott Pepper. And Scott Pepper has a concept he calls the Magician's Agency, where it's a 2-hour show where it's as if he has been invited or asked to try out for some secret society of magicians, and that's sort of the story that goes along with it. And he's performing this here. He's brought this to this kind of neat, it sounds like a very interesting venue called Frank, which is a former church turned theater turned restaurant and bar. And this is Scott Pepper does a large illusion show, and he's been able to bring a part of that into this environment. And I think that kind of thinking is wonderful. When you see magicians take something and say, okay, maybe I don't have the most ideal stage, but I can go to this environment where I have somebody who wants to bring people in and do a show.
Yeah, a lot of magic is it's about making choices and decisions from the beginning to selecting what you're going to study. Or not where you're going to study, but when you're studying, picking things that work for you, all the way to the decisions you make within those routines and the decisions you make on stage in the moment when things happen, like when people shoot fireworks at you. What do you do? Mm-hmm. And I think that we all just need to step back for a minute and think more about what it is that we're doing in regards to the context of our own sort of world and bubble that we all occupy, because every magician, every person has different interests and different takes on things. Yet you see a lot of people doing things solely because somebody else did it,
Mm-hmm.
which it's a habit I think that is too prevalent in magic. That'd be nice to see break up more than it is.
Let's start thinking of some of the, because we talk to performers like, okay, they're looking to like do walk around or maybe restaurant magic or maybe get some private gigs. I'm trying to think of like all the different varied places that I'd performed in that I opened up my eyes. I remember as a teenager I lived in Fort Lauderdale, and so there was a big yacht culture, yacht parties, yacht stuff. That was a thing because sometimes you would have these yacht cruises, these 2-hour cruises where the yacht would go out, there'd be a party on board, and you do magic. You'd have to be able to do magic outdoors, but do magic up and down below decks, up and below decks, and that was sort of a different environment. So that was one kind of interesting gig. There were day cruises. They had these day cruises where they would just go out for the day and come back. It was a lot like working at a theme park because you're doing the same show every day. That was another interesting venue. I once worked as a teenager we had this, I think it was the Miccosukee Indian Resort, and this Indian village, and you would take this thing called it was the Jungle Queen. You'd take this boat through the canals of Fort Lauderdale, and they'd take you to this Indian village, which actually turned out to be in a neighborhood not too far from where I lived, but it felt like you're going to this island, and there would be a barbecue. You'd have like alligators you could look at, and then there was a stage, like this outdoor stage where they would do a variety show. Very, very unconventional. I used to do magic at a circus that was an indoor circus, a full one-ring circus with elephants, clowns, everything, that was at the Swap Shop. And they still do this to this day, I think, in Fort Lauderdale. It's the world's largest flea market, and one of the permanent attractions they have there was a circus. So that was one of my first gigs ever, was working a circus. And it was a neat experience because it was a real functioning circus, but it just happened to be stationary, not unlike working, if you worked at Disneyland or some other sort of, Disneyland was a little bit nicer than this, but that was another venue that I remember. I worked at a magic shop that had its own birthday party theater in the back. So it was a magic shop up front. In the back, we would do birthday parties, pull out the tables, do pizza, do present, do cake, and do magic show on a little stage there. That was another neat venue. And I'm trying to think of some others, but what were some of the interesting venues you've performed in?
I think one of the most interesting I wouldn't even call it a venue, situations that I performed in was somebody hired me to do close-up magic for a line outside of a sneaker shop. And it was a new sneaker store that was opening up, and they had some specialty kicks, like some special Air Jordans or something. At the time, I was even less into sneakers. I know a little bit more about him now because I watched a documentary and I have a couple pairs. But when I showed up to the gig, the owner called me and said, "Hey, do you have like plain clothes? Don't wear like a blazer or anything." And I wasn't in a full suit. Mm-hmm. I think I had like a t-shirt and a blazer because it was sort of like semi-casual. And I took that off immediately and just was essentially a person in line waiting to get sneakers because he didn't want anyone to know that he'd hired entertainment. And so he hired me for an hour. The first 15 minutes I just stood in line because I had to establish cred, like I was actually there. I can't just show up and be like, "Hey, what's going on?" So just on my phone, like pretending to read stuff or text or whatever people do on their phones. Apparently I don't know what normal humans do on their phones. And I was listening in to what people were talking about and trying to find an in because I'm not in that world. They're just lingos flying back and forth. I'm like, how do I possibly jump in? And then there was a moment where someone mentioned like waiting in line with their grandma, and I made some comment or joke that broke the ice a little bit. And then I was able to kind of work my way in. And once I started doing a show, the whole line from against the wall sort of came out. And it was great because everyone was very aware of like, okay, we know where we are in position. But they came away from the wall and circled around me. And I did like a 35-minute just close-up magic set. And they thought it was amazing. And then they all went back against the wall. And it totally broke up their like overnight stay waiting in line. It was like at midnight I did this.
Oh, wow.
And then I got back in line and then just kind of like slowly
I don't really
walked
like
away
sneakers
and just
anyways.
disappeared around the corner. And then the owner was there and he, gave me some cash. And that part was kind of shady. He's like, "Here's your cash in an alley." I'm like, "I'm getting out of here." But it was super fun because it was undercover magic. Like
Yeah,
I never.
that's
No one knew that I was a magician other than the guy that hired me. I mean, they knew I was a magician, but I wasn't a hired
well,
the
that's
magician. I was just a guy.
that's a neat moment, and I think that's cool that when you have a promoter, somebody knows like let's create some special event that people will talk about, and it's not like oh, and they hired a magician. It's we waited, and there was one of the guys there did magic for us and was cool. That might make it even more special than that. A little pro tip for some of the performers out there who are looking for another way to do gigs, and this is coming up. I had a buddy that I could reliably get him work every year on Mother's Day, right? Always could get him booked on Mother's Day. Do you know what he did?
What did he do?
Well, my sister-in-law was a proprietor of an Outback steakhouse, and Mother's Day would have a huge line. But by hiring a magician, the restaurant owner, in this case my sister-in-law, was able to keep everybody very happy because sometimes they have to wait several hours to get a table in there. But with my friend Jeff, I could always get him booked every single year because they would think about the problem of like, okay, when are you going to deal with your most number of angry customers? It's going to be when you have them waiting the longest, and Mother's Day is one of the longest waits for any restaurant, and that's a great opportunity to hire a magician. And if you're a magician that wants to solicit yourself to a restaurant, yeah, not every restaurant would be into this, but if you call them up and say like, hey, do you have a big line? Do you expect this kind of thing? And you get them to address this problem, and they're thinking to themselves, yes, that's a big problem. Speaking of big, it's my book, Illusion XX.
So big it can't even stay on the shelf.
I know, it just fell through the floor almost. You call them up and it's like, hey, here's your pain point. Here's your problem. You're going to have a long line on Mother's Day, and you may have some angry people, which they probably do. I've got a solution. Okay, what is it? Cancel Mother's Day? No. Magician. A magician to entertain people in the line. And you've solved a need and a problem for them. Not everybody's going to go for it, but it's a very cool way to present your magic in a situation where maybe normally they wouldn't go for it, but this one time of year, it can be a big gig like some people Easter is and Halloween and New Year's Eve, etc. So I love that kind of thinking. And back to Scott Pepper, who is doing his Magicians Society or his Magicians Association show, Magicians Agency. I thought that was really clever. It was a way for a guy who normally does a big stage show, a big illusion show, find a venue where it can fit. Because if you're doing illusions, it's hard to find venues to perform in, but he made it fit there.
A tiny shift would be to just, instead of looking at a specific venue that you want to perform in, look at the context and look at the goals, the overarching goals. So for me, it wasn't that I wanted to perform in a line undercover as a magician at a sneaker opening. It was he had a need, which was there's a bunch of bored people here and I want to entertain them without them knowing that he was sending things their way. So I kind of was able to sneak in and sneak out. And that wasn't something that I thought to put myself into. That was sort of came out of just this guy finding me looking for a magician. But ever since that, it shifted my way of looking at different gigs.
That would be a great thing if I was trying to do regular types of shows on my website or my card, maybe put undercover magician.
Yeah.
And people go, what's undercover magician? Like, oh, let's say you have a party or something, but you want it to feel very spontaneous. Not like it's just, oh, we hired a magician, we hired this. I'll spontaneously do magic. I'll start creating miracles or whatever. And then I'm going to fade away. Not literally fade away. That costs extra. And that's going to create a wonderful special moment. And people are like, well, who was that? And you can say that's a way to make it even more magical or even more classy. So let's see if we can start that as something that people list. Like, I do the undercover magician. What's that? Oh, well, I'm a surprise magician. People don't know that I'm a magician. I'm just a guest. Then all of a sudden I start doing all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, when I try to describe strolling magic to people that don't understand what it is, one of the things I tell people is I'm basically a professional party guest because I show up, I look like a party guest, and then all of a sudden I start doing magic, and it's great. And that's it. The client's happy, the guests are happy, I'm happy, and we're done.
Hopefully they're happy.
No,
now,
hopefully.
The subject was unconventional performing situations.
Mm-hmm.
And ways in which magic could be applied differently or stagecraft. And I understand that you quite recently did something kind of unique and odd.
Yes, I helped to design and build a magical box for a company called Exploding Kittens.
The Exploding Kittens, the super popular card game.
Yes, they raised about $9 million on Kickstarter for their
I
card
almost
game.
was drinking water and did a spit take there.
Oh, right all over the microphone, the computer. That would have been perfect. Wouldn't needed another Kickstarter to fix that. So they wanted $10,000 for their game, and they got $9 million. Their game blew up.
Well, they failed.
Figuratively, literally. And all of a sudden, they have this big company, and they do really fun, cool things. For their most recent Kickstarter, for their new game, Bears vs. Babies, they reached $2 million, and then they told all of the people backing the campaign, we don't want money anymore. We don't need it. Stop giving it to us. We want you to do fun, cool stuff instead, like send us weird artwork or, send us a picture of 10 bathtub babies or something. They were like weird Batman bears and things like that. And so for WonderCon, down in Anaheim, they wanted to build something kind of cool and fun and magical.
Describe WonderCon.
WonderCon is basically like Comic-Con a decade or so ago. It's a really big convention, but it's not massive, and it's not like overflowing and crazy and packed the way that Comic-Con is. It still feels kind of intimate and fun. You can walk around, and there's elbow room still. It's very heavy on the cosplay community, so there's just amazing costumes everywhere, and everyone that's there is really into it. But the thing that we made was a vending machine, a kittens dispenser that was very simple. It just dispensed the product, the game, and
Not actual kittens.
Not actual kittens. You could get the game, the not safe for work version, the expansion, or a pin, and you would buy all these things. It was basically a vending machine, and except that it was made out of cardboard and it was human powered. So you push these big buttons, and in the what looked like a digital screen, it was actually a puppet show window, and we'd have little Wile E. Coyote style signs on sticks that would come up and give you instructions on what to do next. And then hands would come out of the machine to accept the money, and then your products would just fall onto the ground. Super fun, very simple, straightforward as far as the concept goes. Executing it was very complicated because I was in the machine puppeting every time somebody was doing something, keeping track and doing all this stuff with my Exploding Kittens team members. But we had one other thing for sale on the machine, which was, the games were around $20. For $1, you could buy a random thing. And this quite literally was a random thing. People would come, they were there 8 hours for 3 straight days, putting dollar bills into this machine, and they would get out a pineapple or a scrub brush or a loofah or Irish Spring soap or a banana or a balloon animal or a book or a cowboy hat. I mean, it went on and on and on, which was hilarious, and people were just putting dollars in to find out what was going to happen. It's a very simple idea, very simple concept, but the execution of that was overwhelming. We pretty much wiped out dollar stores all over Anaheim because we had to go just stock up on random things. And the biggest part of it that really, I think, links to magic so well is that the idea of a perfectly random thing coming out of the machine, if it was actually random and chosen by a random generator computer, it wouldn't seem as random to us humans as something that was perfectly curated, which is the opposite of random, yet that's what sells the illusion. So instead of it being a random item, we actually were making decisions every single time about who is the person in front of us, what object would be funny to give to them. Has this person been here before? What have we given out in the last 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes? How big of a crowd do we have? Do we give out one of our, giant things that we only have a couple of because it's really funny right now? And then on top of that, we also had to do improvisation because sometimes people would give us things we weren't expecting. A couple days in, people started putting objects back into the machine, and we had to figure out what we were going to do with it. Do we reject it, or do we accept that? So one example was somebody put $1 in, and a banana came out of the machine, and then they put the banana into the machine, and then the machine froze for a second, and then a sign came up that said processing. Hilarious kittens. And then a banana peel came out of the machine, and that's what they got.
How was the banana?
Yeah, it was, banana vanished. It would have been actually the banana came out and it was cut into perfect slices. The old magic trick, but it was just the idea that creating this concept of pure randomness from the user perspective, from the people using this machine. It was so simple. Just the $1 goes in, this random thing comes out, and it was just this beautiful thing to witness. Like a pineapple just falls out of a machine. How weird is that? And it's a cardboard machine. You know there's people in there, and it's just your brain kind of breaks. But from our perspective, we just had thousands of things, and we're running around, and after a while you get decision fatigue just trying to keep track of all these things, and what do we do next? And we can't put a potato out because we just put a potato out, and half the things were just because of proximity, because they were right there next to us. And it's sort of what magic is like, where you're thinking about a million things and you're so in the moment, and all you can think about is how it's not going the way you want it to, and you're just trying to catch up and keep, on top of everything and make sure everything goes well. And then from the user perspective, they're like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. This is amazing.
Performance art. You created a bit of theater. And it was, I remember you describing this initially, and I had trouble kind of conceiving of what this was going to be. And then now, you describing the process, the engagement, and I go, oh, this is brilliant. I didn't see it on the other side of it. I'm like, I guess so, or whatever. And now that I see what you're saying, I'm like, oh, I get this, and the kind of the effort and the intent that was going into to create this bit of performance art. I think that's wonderful.
It's the second project I've done with them now. The first being they had a huge deck of cards printed, a 6-foot tall deck of cards, and I did a magic trick with it. But this is the second project I've done where we had an idea, a concept that was a little too big to imagine without seeing it in reality, and there was just complete doubt that it would work going in. But they were willing to commit to something enough that they didn't mind if it was a total disaster or total failure. They said, let's do this and see what happens. And if it fails, then we'll learn from that, and then we'll try something different. And it happened to be one of the most popular things at WonderCon. We had huge crowds of people for 3 days straight. All of the people at the convention that were working the showroom floor were yelling at us constantly because we were creating hazards for the fire department and just traffic issues constantly. And one of the workers on the floor at the end of the convention looked at this thing that we built and said this was our nemesis the whole weekend. So
Good.
That amount of disruption, I think, was a good thing. And to sort of cap that all off, I have here a excerpt from Juan Tamariz, which is, it really sort of encapsulated this whole project. It's the magician's objective, and there's a lot here, but the last paragraph is going even further. The spectators should not even want to figure it out. Besides being astonished, they should be dumbfounded, caught in hallucination, feeling amused, spellbound, and totally fascinated by the mystery they have witnessed. The shock of mystery suspends any ability to analyze, as well as the desire to do so. And this was absolutely true of this machine. Essentially, it was just a facade of a giant vending machine, and the backing was curtains. We were just right behind it, and there was just a very thin black curtain in between us and the audience. And we had all these stories, these user stories we'd created for what if people try and peek behind? What do we do that discourages them from doing it? And almost nobody tried to look behind the curtain, like literally look behind the curtain, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, which was amazing to us because the machine itself was so compelling that they wanted to believe that it was this sort of cognizant machine that was making decisions and acting, even though they knew that, of course, it was just us back there with signs and putting our hands out.
Yeah,
I mean,
the process was more interesting than the method.
yeah.
You know, and that's great. I think that's just some of what Juan was saying. Like, that's great magic is where the experience is greater than the method. The experience is greater than the explanation. Is you can have an explanation, but it's just that's wonderful.
If it's good enough, you almost don't want the explanation because you're like, no, I'm happy, with what I just saw.
Well, Jordan, speaking of happiness, what are we going to do in the secret session? What is going to make us happy there?
Well, Andrew, we've done a lot of cards. We've done some amazing peaks and techniques, and I don't have any rhymes other than that. And we did some rubber bands. We did a lot of rubber band magic, and we will do more rubber band magic in the future. We've got endless amounts. I think we're going to get into some coin magic this time around. Ooh. And we'll work on some of the classic palms and moves and things, and we'll get to a little more technical vanishes as well. Have a little bit of work on some things.
Cool. I love coin magic because if you just have one or two coins on you, they're flat. You can keep them in your pocket at all times. It's easy to practice, and it is a wonderful bit of variation to bring up if you do a lot of card magic. And you pull out a coins, something coin-wise. And I see coin magic always get a really strong reaction at the Magic Castle. I always see, just really, really strong, simple, straightforward, great coin magic because card magic sometimes feels like it's a little bit of it's just, it's a card thing. It's a sleight of hand thing. It's one step away from the trick your uncle does. But coin magic where things can vanish, dematerialize, rematerialize, that's real skill, but that looks like it's just such pure magic because lay people are aware of that. Like, well, you can have a trick deck, and maybe not to say that negates card magic at all, but most lay people know how to do a card trick. A fewer number can do a coin trick, and if they do, it's the rub on the elbow or a very simple French drop or whatever. But if you can do something artful with that, I found that some of the strongest reactions I've had where people go, "Oh, you're really good," because it's a really good card trick and often be hard to tell if it's skill or if it's just clever. Really good coin magic, you look like you're Gandalf.
So there's a genre of magic that I'm sort of working with Simon Cornell to define, and we call it naked on a beach magic, which is if you were naked on a beach, which that's up to you. Mm-hmm. What would you be able to do? And that's what we're going to go over a little bit. Okay, well, if you want to take it there, would this magic work naked on a beach? Right. If you had no props, no special pockets or, clothing, you just had a coin, or it doesn't even have to be a coin. It could be a shell or any a leaf, some flat object. Would you be able to pick something up and do a miracle with it? And I love that kind of stuff because it's just you. And I find when I'm out in the real world, sometimes I don't necessarily need to, like, let's say I have a $50 on me and I can use that. But if I'm at a bar and there's a cucumber slice, why not use that? Because it's more organic than pulling this weird coin out of my pocket. Literally organic. Only do magic with organic cucumbers. We'll talk about that.
But even a coin is a very simple prop that people can understand, and would you be able to do magic with it, I think is great.
And, most of the time when I'm out and somebody asks me to do something, the first thing I do is a coin trick, and I always ask to borrow a coin. And I've practiced this with silver dollars all the way down to dimes, so I can do these tricks with tiny coins. It's not as good because I have big hands, tiny coins. It's like I could hide the dime almost anywhere. But it's good to be able to do tricks with coins of all different sizes and objects, sort of weird objects. Sometimes they're not perfectly round. Sometimes they're really thick. Sometimes they're, made up of different materials. So practice with all sorts of stuff. I've done this with crackers and made those disappear, and it's super fun.
Cool.
Yep. So we'll talk about a bunch of that.
Awesome. Well, let's adjourn now to the secret session.
All right. Invisible gavel time.